Good day, good night, good morning, good evening. Whatever time it is, wherever you are, welcome to yet another video in our ongoing series of CSEC Maths videos. In this video, we're going to deal with the solution of quadratic equations. Alright, it sounds complex, it sounds like something big and difficult, but it is really and truly quite simple and straightforward. Once you have the underlying foundation of being able to deal with linear equations, then quadratic equations is just a half a step forward. So we're going to use this document here, which is the same document that you would have used when you were learning to factorize, because what happens is that in section 1 in your paper 2, 99 times out of 100, if they ask you to solve a quadratic equation in there, it will be using factorization. In section 2 is where you will get the quadratic equations that you can't factorize, and then they will ask you to solve those using the quadratic formula. But we're not there as yet. Alright? So in this video, what we're going to do is solve quadratic expressions that are factorizable, that we could factorize. And then having factorized them, we use the factorization as a central plank, a central pillar to solve the quadratic equations. So just to underscore again, factorizing a quadratic equation is not the same thing as factorizing a quadratic expression, is not the same thing as solving a quadratic equation. Big difference. So what I'm going to do is use the same examples in this document here. Alright, so let us start with the very first one. Alright, we have the expression x squared plus 5x minus 36. That is an expression. As soon as you introduce an equal sign, it becomes an equation. In other words, this expression is equal to something over here. Alright? It could be some number, or it could be some other expression, or, watch this, it could be our good friend 0. So for the sake of learning this particular topic, what I'm going to do is ask you to use the same questions in this document, and for each of these expressions, all you have to do is equate them to 0. Equate them to 0 and solve. Or as you would see, having the answers on page 10 in the same document, you could equate the expressions in the answers to 0 as well, as you would see coming down here. So x squared plus 5x minus 36 is equal to 0. You have that as an equation and they ask you to solve that. What do? Well, your first step is to factorize. Right? So in other words, we simplify this quadratic expression here. So we factorize and we get x plus 9 into x minus 4 is equal to 0. So what we have done is we have expressed one quadratic expression as the product of two linear expressions. Alright? And once we express that product, we can now go into the following bits of logic. Remember that we have started off with the left side being equal to 0. So we just factorize the left side, we change the form, not the value, we change the appearance, but it's the same thing. This is the same thing as that. Alright? That is still equal to 0. So we have two products, something multiplied by something being equal to 0. So here is what I want you to consider now. If you multiply any two entities by 0, what does that mean? What can you derive from that? What is the implication of that? The implication is that at least one of those two entities will be 0. In other words, you just need one entity to be 0 for the whole thing to be 0. That is the nature of 0. So if I multiply 6 by 0, the answer will be 0. If I multiply 2 million by 0, the answer will be 0. If I multiply A by 0, the answer will be 0. What that means is that if I multiply, let me see, let me just write this down. If I multiply A by B and the answer is 0, it means then either A is equal to 0 or B is equal to 0, or both of them probably equal to 0. Alright? So that is the logic that we're going to use to solve the quadratic equation. Remember, you multiply two quantities by 0 or two entities by 0, it means one of them is equal, at least one of them is equal to 0. If we say at least one of them is equal to 0, we don't know which one is equal to 0. So it could be A or it could be B, or it could be both A and B being equal to 0. So what we do is consider both cases, and that is what will give us the solution to this quadratic equation. Alright, so in this scenario here, we have x plus 9 and x minus 4 equal to 0. It means then either x plus 9 equals 0, in which case now we have a linear equation, and we just went through a whole set of videos to deal with that. So we know that to find x, you just take the plus 9 across, x equal to minus 9, or x minus 4 is equal to 0, in which case we take the minus 4 and we carry it across, x is equal to 4. So here now, your two solutions would be x equal to minus 9 and x equal to plus 4. Alright, so generally speaking, anytime you're solving a quadratic equation, you will expect to get two solutions for x. Alright, we will go into the intricate details of what that means a little later on. We wouldn't get into that yet. Right, but just be aware, if you have a linear expression, you have one solution. If you have a if you have a linear equation, you have one solution. If you have a quadratic equation, you have two solutions. Alright? So keep that in mind, because you will need it later on in the C-Sec Math syllabus here. Oy, oy, oy. Alright, what else we got? Alright, so what I'm going to do now is just do one more example of the solution of a quadratic equation. Alright, so let us go with one of the bigger ones from the same document. Let us look at number 25. In number 25, the answer for number 25 is, right? We know that 2x minus 3 into 7x minus 1 equals 0. Sometimes they get the equation like this from the start. So in other words, they start you off with the factorized form of the expression. Alright? So whereas in the example a while ago we had x squared plus 5x minus 36, which we then had to factorize to get x plus 9 and x minus 4. And then using the zero logic, we said that either x plus 9 is equal to 0, in which case x is equal to minus 9, or x minus 4 is equal to 0, in which case x is equal to plus 4. Sometimes instead of having it factorized, they give you the factorized form of the expression. And having the factorized form to start with you then just go straight into what I call the zero logic. Alright? So from here you say either 2x minus 3 equals 0, in which case 2x is equal to 3, x is equal to 3 over 2, or 7x minus 1 is equal to 0, in which case 7x is equal to 1, x is equal to 1 over 7. So at the end of the day, x is equal to 3 over 2, x is equal to 1 over 7. Those are your two solutions. Alright, so this video would have been pretty short, quick and snappy, and that is the nature of this particular topic. Anytime you have a quadratic equation to solve, the hardest part of that is to factorize the equation, factorize the expression, sorry. Right? So you have a quadratic expression being equal to 0. That is what I should say. Right? Anytime you have a quadratic expression being equal to 0, alright, so that's basically it. You have two examples now. We have one where they start you off with the original quadratic expression, which they then put into an equation by putting it being equal to 0, and they ask you to find x, in which case you have to factorize first. The alternative, which we just went through, is where they start you off with the factorized form of the expression, which they will then put into an equation by equating it to 0, and then from there you just go into the zero logic and you find x. Alright, so just to reiterate, quadratic equations, two solutions. Linear equations, one solution. Alright, so go through the questions in this document. You have 30 questions, 30 sets of answers. You could use the same questions. All you have to do is equate the expression to 0, put each expression being equal to 0, then factorize it, and then having factorized it, go through the zero logic where you equate each of the two linear products, each of the two linear expressions, to 0. Alright, so that way you get a chance to practice solving the quadratic equation, and you also get to double up on your practice for quadratic factorization. Alright, so continue practicing, continue working, we move on ahead with this program.